Thank you, brothers and sisters, for meeting on short notice. I don't come to Abu Dhabi that often, so I appreciate the opportunity to have fellowship with all of you. My calling in life is very different from my father's. So I'm not here to preach a sermon. I hopefully can be an encouragement. My calling has been to be a Christian in the work setting. That's what I've been doing the last, couple of decades in a technology company. And the encouragement I have is for others who are also working. God did not call me to a full-time ministry to serve God, like my dad. I was 5 or 6 years old when CFC started meeting in our home. And we met, I was telling Brother Biju and his family before, we met like you are, 20, 25 of us, when we got thrown out of a church. Some of you have heard about the way CFC started in Bangalore. I was about 5, 6 years old. So I remember these types of gatherings. In fact, now if you go to CFC in Bangalore, it's a much bigger church. There's 300-400 people there. But I remember when it was like this. And in fact, I think it's very special when you're small, because it's easy when you get bigger to get caught up in the size and you think you're something. I was telling the family that when we first met, we were very unpopular. Nobody wanted to be part of CFC because we were like the rejects out of another church. And it's easy when you get bigger and you become popular, you think, but in that early days, God taught certainly my own lessons. I just thought I would share with you a little bit because, in Acts chapter 2, the first century church met like this. They didn't have meeting halls. Many of them were persecuted. But it says in Acts chapter 2, they met together and they encouraged one another. And they sought to meet as often as possible, maybe even every day. Those days they didn't have cars. Okay, so you couldn't really go very far. The idea of many of you were born in India, to be able to even go from some part of India to Abu Dhabi, or in my case, I live in the United States, from Bangalore, that's unheard of in the first century. So they lived within maybe a mile of each other. They walked and they met in the homes, and they used that as an opportunity to encourage one another. Most important thing is to encourage one another, because at that time, they thought Jesus was going to come anytime in the first century. The Apostle John, who lived the longest of them, thought Jesus was going to come soon. Read Revelation, that's in the first century, so how much more? So the purpose of our meeting together is to encourage one another, and each of us has a role of some way in which we can encourage one another. I'll just share a few verses. If you look at 1 Corinthians 14, First Corinthians 14. Okay, so the way in which we'll do tonight is so that you help me stay awake, okay? Because I'm a little jet lagged. I'm going to ask questions. That way we can make it interactive, and that way you can also help me stay awake, okay? And I promise you it won't be long, because if it goes too long, I might fall asleep. So we'll kind of keep it brief, okay? All right. One brother read 1 Corinthians 14, one verse, and then I want a sister to read the next verse, and another brother can read one. Let's just go like that till we go a few more verses. So everybody can participate in reading. 1 Corinthians 14. Any brother who gets it, read verse 1, and then a sister can read verse 2.
Let love be our highest goal, but we should also desire the special abilities the Spirit gives, especially the ability to prophesy.
Okay, any sister read verse 2.
The one who speaks in strange tongues does not speak to others but to God, because no one understands him. He is speaking secret truths by the power of the Spirit.
Verse 3, another brother who hasn't read.
But everyone who prophesies speaks to men for their strengthening, encouraging and comfort.
Next verse. Some sister.
He who speaks in a tongue edifies himself, but he who prophesies edifies the church.
Keep reading. Another brother.
That we all speak in tongues, but rather that we prophesy. For better is he that prophesies than he that speaketh in tongues, except he interpret, that the church may receive edification.
Okay, let's pause there. So, if you read carefully here, right? What is the Apostle Paul saying is the most important gift? Spiritual gift. Right? That should be obvious. But if you look at much of Christians today, right? And assume you haven't read, we just read 1 Corinthians 14. It's very apparent there. All of you said that very clearly. But if you go to a nominal Christian church, what is the spiritual gift? You ask somebody, what's the most important spiritual gift? What do you think you'll hear? Healing. Okay, that's one answer. What else? Deliverance. Who is given prominence in the church there? Healer, someone healing. Who else? Music. Gift of music. Oh, you're a gifted musician. What else? Preaching. Someone who's up in the pulpit. Okay. So all of them have not gotten light on the most important spiritual gift. That's not to say that those are not important gifts. In fact, it talks about there'll be one. The teacher often is the one with the speaking in the mouth. But it talks about here, the most important gift is the gift of prophecy. Okay, now, again, let's not assume you've read 1 Corinthians 14. You went to these churches. Plenty. We were talking earlier today about these, many of the Christians today that believe in the, health and wealth. Okay, so in other words, God blesses you and you'll be healthy. God doesn't bless you, you'll be sick. God blesses you, you get money. God doesn't bless you. It's a complete fallacy. Okay. If you went to one of these churches, even let's say a Pentecostal church, and you said the most important gift is prophecy, what do you think they will say prophecy is? Foretelling the future. Right? And they get up after a tongue and said, God told me this, God told me that. Okay, now let's read the definition of prophecy very clearly. Okay, in verse 3. Anybody who hasn't read, read it again.
But one who speaks to men for edification and exhortation.
Okay. So here's the definition. Very simply. 3 things, and I'm going to make it simple for you so you can remember it. Okay? First one is, it starts with the E. Edification. Second word also starts with an E, in my translation. Encouragement or exhortation. Third one starts in your thing, it says comfort, I'll use encouragement. So it's 3 E's. Edification, exhortation, and encouragement. Now my question is this. Do you have to have some special qualifications to do these 3? Do you have to be a gifted musician? A gifted preacher? A gifted healer? Can a sister who is at home and doesn't have any ministry at the pulpit, can she have one of these 3? Edification, exhortation, encouragement. She might be more of an encouragement to her children than maybe the father who is not there as much during the day, comes home late in the evening after work. So, brothers and sisters, the most important thing we can all seek to do is to prophesy. But the fallacy is, most of Christianity thinks prophecy is, like our brother said, foretelling the future, when plain apparent it's three things: encouragement, exhortation, edification. And there's a place for all of them. Encouragement sometimes is just giving a word that, or it might be not even a word, maybe prayed. Exhortation might be a little bit more. You have a relationship with the brother and sister, and you can say something to them that is not just an encouragement, but actually challenging them. Edification is also taking that even further, where you correct them. It's like a coach. So, this is what I seek for my own life, and I encourage every one of you, brothers and sisters, to seek the gift of prophecy, so that wherever the Lord places you, and I think there's three circles of influence. We were talking about this also at dinner. Every one of us starts off our life single, right? We don't begin our life married. You may end your life married, but you start your life single, and in your single days, your first circle of influence, which will be there for the rest of your life, because even after you get married and you have children, you have responsibility for your own temple, is that in your, as a person, the first circle of influence is to ensure that your temple of the Holy Spirit is pure. The next, God may give you a family. Now you have responsibility for at least one other person, a wife or a husband, and then maybe some children. And then third, God may give you a responsibility in the body for some other brothers and sisters. You might be a leader, or you might be just a brother and sister here. And in any of those circles, it's like concentric circles. Yourself, the family, every one of us can practice these three E's. Okay, so initially on my own, I may not, I can certainly encourage myself by reading the Word, but maybe the Lord brings another brother or a sister adjacent to me who's walking. Thank God that we don't have to be alone in this walk. We have brothers and sisters we can meet together. 25 of you here. How many in Dubai? 100 plus? That's a big number. You have plenty of opportunity. If you're single brothers, you can encourage one another so you don't have to walk alone. And then exhort and edify. Okay, husband and wife, we can do the same thing. Encourage, exhort, edify, because God is not, God's will for us is not to walk alone, but to walk together. Then maybe children come, parent to child, child to parent one day. Encourage, exhort, edify. So I see my own calling to say, Lord, you may not have given me a ministry, and that's not my calling to be in the same place my dad has in a full-time ministry, but to the extent that I can encourage, exhort, edify people in the workplace. That's where I work. I have a number of people who are in the technology industry who email me and ask me some advice, or I'm in a reasonably senior position in a company, and I've been very vocal about my faith and my standing for Jesus. And, you know, just like Daniel, they notice and they ask me questions. I say, Lord, if you can use me in that setting, then I'm fulfilling the gift of prophecy. I may have no desire to foretell the future. That's not prophecy. Encouraging. So my question to you, can all of us seek the gift of prophecy as is described in this verse? Is it possible? We may not be doing that, but is it possible? Because those three, all of us can do. Right? Even someone who doesn't have a voice, who is, by world's definition, dumb, they can write. Right? Many blind people who couldn't speak could write. Many people who couldn't hear. But many of us have voices. Nobody here does not have a voice. Right? God given us voice, He's given us ears, He's given us ability to write. Sometimes it might be an email that we can encourage someone with. Sometimes it might be a phone call, a voicemail, or a phone conversation. Most often, if God's given you a home, it is to your family, where your wife needs a word of encouragement, or your husband needs a word of encouragement. Your children absolutely need encouragement all the time, until they have their own home maybe. right? Initially, there's probably a lot of exhortation, edification of children. My 8-year-old and 11-year-olds, they don't always want to do the right thing. But you're not living your entire life spanking them, right? Otherwise, what kind of father or mother are you? You're encouraging them, and then one day they become a friend to you, right? And you're walking together, just like brother and brother or brother and sister. And one day, they will encourage you as you get older. Think about that. So wherever the Lord has placed us, brothers and sisters, the most important thing we can do is prophesy. And have a desire, say, Lord, you've placed me on this earth for a limited amount of time. And listen, we don't know how long that time is, right? I guarantee one of two things is going to happen. Okay? There won't be a third. We will either die or Jesus will return. There is no third. So which one is going to happen sooner? We don't know. I was visiting my brother Santosh, and he lives in Colorado, which is about 1,000 miles away from where we live. And that weekend, one of the brothers in his church, who is probably, I think, in his 40s, maybe early 50s, but late 40s, has a younger brother who's 30. Died that weekend of a heart attack. 30 years old. He'd just gotten married, 2 years married, no children. Completely fit, no, gone. So we don't know. We don't think we have to live in fear that the Lord will take us. But sometimes the Lord may take us. For sure, I believe the coming of the Lord is soon. Now, the Apostle John said that his coming was soon in 90 AD, which was almost 2,000 years ago. But when you see many of the signs of the times, and by the way, all of it's happening in the Middle East, right? Israel and Iran and Syria and Iraq, that's all the... And Jesus said when these things happen, it's all happening here, the times will come. So we have to be ready, and for the amount of time that the Lord has left with us on this earth, the beauty of these gatherings is we can encourage one another, we can ask questions of each other, how should we think about, and if we don't have the answers, we can write an email to somebody else who might have an answer. Think about all these resources we have now that many of the saints who went ahead of us didn't have. All they could do was pray. But here we have all these resources. So shame on us if when we have all these resources, we're focused only on ourselves. Right? The Lord can use us in a way to encourage one other brother or sister, edify and exhort. And then God will give you ways by which you can make this simple to even your children. So let me share a word for those of you who have children. Because I am no expert. Many of you are much older than me and have children who are older than me. So I'm not at all saying this with if anything, I used to think, oh, it must be easy to have children and bring them up until I had my own. And then I see how tough it is. And I have tremendous respect for parents who have brought up not just one, but multiple godly children. Because from the point a child is young now with the schools, the influences of the world are coming at them so intensely, right? And for us, I'm 48. For those of you in your 40s and 50s, it might be a little easier. Now for the young kids, that they're hearing things at 8, 10, 15 that are influences in their life that are. So God will give you ways by which you can make it simple and easy to them, and very easy things. So I have a girl who's 11, and I have twin boys who are 8. And there's something about boys of the same age that they love to fight. Everything from the point they could, if you didn't get 2 of the same thing, they'd fight over the one. That's natural. So, how should you can discipline them. So we've been listening to, as a family, we try to do this as often as possible every dinner. These for those, all of you have a mobile phone, right? Think about it. That's also special. But have you seen this mobile app called the Bible Study app that's available on iPhone and Android phone, which has all the basic Christian messages, 15 messages. We find that very helpful in our family. So we play that for 15 minutes and we listen to that as a family. And then we discuss something. And these are all messages by my dad and on various different things. And they're short, 15, 20 minutes. And for our age, that's probably as long as we can keep them really listening every. So we were reading about the deeds of the flesh and the fruits of the Spirit, right? Anybody remember the deeds of the flesh? If you move to Galatians 5, verse 19. Okay, we'll do it the same way we did before. Let's read from 20. We're going to read 19 all the way to 25. Okay, so let's go like we did before. One brother, one sister. If you've read before, that's okay. You can read again. Galatians 5, verse 19. One verse each.
When you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures,
Verse 20.
idolatry, sorcery, hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division.
Okay, 21.
And envy, drunkenness, these and the like, I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God.
23. 22, I meant.
The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness.
Humility and self-control, there is no law against such things as these.
24.
Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the sinful nature with its passions and desires.
Last verse, 25.
If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit.
Okay. So, I was explaining to my boys, not to say my girl doesn't need this too, but for them especially. What does it mean to crucify the flesh with its affections and lusts? That is hard for an 8-year-old to understand. Right? We understand it now because we have light on that. How can we explain that to an 8-year-old? How old are you, little girl? 7. You're 1 year older than mine. So, we took one phrase out, all of those things in Galatians 5:9. Unfortunately, if you read it, okay, has many things that are very sad about these people who walk in the flesh that describe perverse type of behavior. We don't have to go into that. But you can see in the midst of all of those things, lots of evil things, right? Idolatry in one hand, sexual perversion, and then you see a middle, one deed of the flesh called outbursts of anger. Right? Do you have that in your translation? What's that? Fits of rage. That's even more dramatic than outbursts of anger. This is somebody who just loses it. Right? How is it possible in the middle of all this stuff you have idolatry? How is it possible that you have in the middle of this something like fits of rage and outbursts of anger? You know, what God's telling us is that's just as bad as idolatry or sexual sins. Just as it's all in that list. Okay? All right. Now you go to the fruits of the Spirit part. You see in the middle of all of those things, love, joy, peace, kindness, gentleness, which is the opposite of fits of rage. Okay, now we can explain it to a 7, 8-year-old. So crucifying the flesh with its affection and lust is, Alex and Jason, we're going to work on getting victory over fits of rage or outbursts of anger. It's very easy for 2 boys. I don't mean that they are, this isn't Cain and Abel type of losing anger. But it's small things that ultimately will become like Cain and Abel if you let it fester, right? Cain and Abel probably started off with little fights and then it became ultimately murder. So we are going to work on fits of rage, anger. When you get angry with your brother because something or the other, we're instead going to work on gentleness, right? And ask the Lord to make you a gentle person. That's crucifying the flesh. So God can use us even to encourage the younger ones, and making the gospel simple and easy for them to understand at a young age. So we studied it, and of course, by the next morning they've forgotten it. Okay, so some mornings I take them to school, not every morning. My wife usually takes them to school, but some mornings I take them. So we will discuss that this morning on the way to school. What did we hear last night? Fits of rage and gentleness. Now I'm almost certain, if Alex and Jason were sitting on either side, and you asked them Galatians 5:19-24, what do you remember of deeds of the flesh and fruits of the Spirit? They'll probably remember off that list of things, one, outbursts of anger and gentleness, right? And if they could obey it, at some point later on in their teenage years, they're going to have to probably learn a few of those other things, like to lust and some of the other things that become. But if we can make it simple for our children, pick one thing out of those and make it relevant to them at a young age. Again, we're prophesying. Because you're encouraging them, you're edifying them, you're exhorting them. So brothers and sisters, that's all I wanted to share today, is to encourage every one of you, wherever you are in your walk. Okay? For those of you who are young people who are working, in 40, 45, 50, maybe more hours, right? You have a tremendous opportunity to be a witness for the Lord, wherever the Lord's placed you, whatever seniority, wherever you are in that totem pole in the company. Be faithful in little things, and God will entrust you with much. The world is in a completely different system, right? And remember that we are running, I'll say this last, we're running a race, right? Running a race is like the story of the hare and the tortoise. Good thing about a race is it doesn't matter how you start, right? It matters what? How you end. Lots of people have started the race. If you remember the Olympics, there was this, in the 2016 Olympics, there was this Somalian guy, I think he's now a British citizen, running the, I don't know, it was the 5,000 or 10,000 meters. In the Olympics, I think around somewhere halfway through the race, so let's just say it was 25 laps, so 10,000 meters, I think. Somewhere around 12 laps, he stumbled on somebody else's foot. Wasn't even his fault. Fell down. Okay. Now, in an Olympic race like that, you fall down, you've lost about 10 seconds, you can kiss your dreams of a gold medal goodbye. It's not going to happen. This guy gets up, he has 12 more laps. The people who were competing with him are far ahead of him by at least 10, 15 seconds. He gets up, every lap he's gaining on them. Okay, little by little by little. Gets the last lap, he wins the race. Beautiful picture to me of how, as a young man or young woman, or it can be older too, but if you slipped and fallen and you feel, Lord, the race is still on. If the Lord hasn't come and you haven't been taken as yet, you haven't died, there's still time. And in Hebrews 12 it says, let's look at that verse. We can close on that. We all know this very well, right? Hebrews 12, verse 1 and 2. Somebody want to read it?
Therefore, since we have so great cloud of witness surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set.
Okay, pause there for a second. Okay? Actually, read the second verse. I'm going to talk about it. Another brother or sister, read verse 2.
Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross,
despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God.
Praise God. So, in verse 1, it says, run with what? What does your translation say? With? Endurance. What other words is it used in your translation? When someone said perseverance? Right? Perseverance. Mine, the King James Version says rather patience. Endurance, perseverance, patience. That means it's not over and it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. Okay. Fell down, get up. Don't grovel in the dirt. Just get up and run. And what's our encouragement when we run? Verse 2. Get up. Don't look down. Look up, and ahead of you is Jesus, who is the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. And then alongside, ahead of us, is probably some brothers too. Some other sisters who've gone ahead. Maybe someone coming alongside us, right? How many of you have read or seen the story of this book called Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan? If you haven't, it's a good book to read. Maybe you read it with your children. The beautiful picture in that book was this man, his name is Pilgrim. He comes out of the city of destruction, and then he's walking on this path. It's a picture of our Christian walk on the way to heaven. And the beautiful thing for me in that picture, I remember reading it as a young, as in CFC, hearing the story and then reading it myself, was somewhere along the path, God brings a young man next to him. His name was Faithful. And Christian, now after he, is baptized and he confesses sin, he goes from pilgrim to Christian. He goes alongside Faithful, and Faithful, they both, before they get to heaven, they arrive at a city called Vanity Fair, which is all about money, and Faithful is martyred. He's killed there. And Christian is so sad that he's lost his dear brother who he could walk on the Christian walk together. And no sooner has he started back on the walk after Faithful has been killed, out of the martyrdom of Faithful comes another brother who saw Faithful being martyred and was converted and said, I want to walk. And this other brother, Hopeful, comes along with him. That's the picture to me of, so we don't have to walk a lonely walk. Never. If you're feeling lonely, say, Lord, bring me another brother or another sister alongside me who can encourage me. And thank God that I'm in fellowship here that can be that. And certainly we have that responsibility to our husband and to our wife. We have to be encouragers of them together, because that's what God has called a family to be. And then also with our children and with our parents. So praise God for that. I hope this can encourage any one of you. Let me just review so that you're not deceived on what the word prophecy means, because most people think it's to foretell the future. What is prophecy? It has 3 E's. Encourage, edify, exhort. Okay? If you can remember the letter E in the alphabet, you can remember prophesy. And anytime you think that, prophecy is, because it's all being deceived by, especially the Pentecostals who think prophecy is related to the gift of tongues and foretelling the future. No. Anybody can prophesy. Brother, sister, husband, wife, mother. And it doesn't matter if you're very vocal, if you're a good speaker or not. It matters your heart. Okay. I used an example of deeds of the flesh, fruits of the Spirit. I'd encourage you to go and read that list again. I picked one that was relevant for my children, but there might be one relevant for us adults also, right? And the good news about those deeds of the flesh and fruits of the Spirit, it's almost like 2 sides of the coin. One was the side that God says, here's all the list of bad things I want to cleanse you from as you crucify your flesh. You turn on the other side, you see all the fruits of the Spirit. So pick something that could be relevant to you and maybe even relevant to your children. And third, remember, this is a race. Race is not over in one lap, right? And as long as God's given us another breath for tomorrow is Friday. God willing, we will wake up awake that means there's one more lap in the race. God, thank you for giving me another day to serve you and not taking my breath away. Help me to walk now in a way that's fitting of you and setting my eyes on Jesus, enduring, running with endurance, and God will give us grace. There's no reason to feel discouraged. If you're feeling discouraged, pray with another brother and sister, or pray on your own, and bounce back up, and God will give you grace. Amen?